Greetings, I am Brother Judah from the Congregation of Israel, or More Yehuda. I am a representative of the Nazarene Messianic Party, and I'd like to welcome all of our listeners to our podcast, What Is to Be Done. Here, we investigate geopolitical, historical, biblical, social, and other scientific content. We approach the Bible from a social-political perspective, and we argue this is the appropriate way to approach the Bible because the Bible deals with societies, kingdoms, nations, civilizations. In short, it deals with social sciences. Today, I would like to have a discussion on the FBA'S and the Democrat and the Republican parties. The FBA'S this is an acronym for Foundational Black Americans. And the Foundational Black Americans are making a case that they are tired of being used, or we are tired of being used, for example, and that they are delineating from immigrants wherever they're from, Africa, Caribbean islands. This is their position. And I definitely understand the sentiment. If I was to give a critique, I would say that the FBA'S must clearly define their political line because they appear, and it's not a group, it's made clear, it's not necessarily a organization, but it is the people who are here, either Africans who was brought over as slaves, or Africans who migrated before Columbus and they populated this area. So those who were here through slavery. And they're arguing that whoever it may be, whatever nationality, the FBA's struggle for liberation and freedom must not be used to work in behalf of those who are just exploiters or opportunists. But again, I think it's important for the FBA'S to clarify their political line. Many of them seem to be capitalists or to support capitalism, but I don't know in full. I am under the impression they will consider, let's say, myself, an FBA. I don't support capitalism, for example. So I think they should be clear on their political lines. But this is a movement going on that the people are gravitating to. And in its worst case scenario, it is causing a rift in whatever unity could be made. But you can't blame it entirely on the FBA'S because they're sort of responding to people from other countries who's coming here and reaping the benefits of the ancestors of the FBA, but they're not acknowledging the children of the FBA. So it's not that the FBA are responding in this manner out of despite or hate, but they're responding in this manner because of the lopsided positions in which politicians and migrants and immigrants are taking. But the Democrat and Republican parties, they also are on a hunt for the FBA and migrants. So I think the FBA should clarify their positions, and therefore I put them in this discussion because um, whether you're FBA or whether you're Democrat or Republican, it doesn't really seem that they're coming with solutions that will actually help the masses of the people. And any movement, successful movement, was never accomplished by one ethnicity. Even if, I mean, just all through history. But if you just go back as far as the uh, the Revolutionary War, you know, if it wasn't for African American soldiers and soldiers of other races, so called, then the war would not have been won against Britain. And it's the same thing with slave revolts. You know, the so called slavers, which wasn't just Europeans, they were also Indians or indigenous people who were slavers. You had so called African uh, FBA'S who were slavers, who owned slaves, um, not just on the mainland, but in the Caribbean islands in South America. So you have had um, this conglomerate of people coming together to establish their political position. So slavers, they it wasn't just all white. You had others who was a part. Even slavers were they were whites were the majority of slaveholders, but um, the majority of white people did not own slaves. The majority of white people did not have slaves. But the slaveholder, to maintain his dominion, he employed Indians, he employed Moors and Buffalo soldiers or black people and white people. They all came together to fight against um, those who, let's say, had slave revolts. The Maroons was one group that was employed to crush slave revolts when they made treaties, according to certain documents that I have read. So there's never this just white group that's going to dominate, or just this black group, or just this Asian group. It's always a united group for any successful gains, especially in social science movements. But today I would like to talk about the Democrat and Republican from a former slave, an FBA, former slave. And this FBA former slave is George Washington Woodbey. We're going to look into a discussion that he had in an article he wrote in a Chicago newspaper on September 15th, 1908. So we want to get a political overview. Him being a foundational black American, born a slave, lived through the Revolution, lived through the Civil War and the Reconstruction. And he's going to give his position on the Democrat and the Republican. And to add as a witness, I'm going to also again use excerpts from Philip Randolph. One of our discussions in our podcast, we had a clip of Harry Belafonte making reference to a Philip Randolph, who was a giant in social activism. So without further ado, we're going to look into this here. This is again September 15th, 1908. And we'd like to welcome you to our podcast. And let's do some investigating here on these political parties that's presented before us. Okay, these political parties. Democrat and Republican. Elder and Reverend Would be, I'm thinking about the writer of The Lost Tribes of Myth, Professor Alan Godby. No, we're looking at Reverend or Pastor George Washington Woodby. He says, fellow colored citizens, we are at a crisis in our race variety history. We are at a crisis in our race variety history. Therefore, an error just now on the part of our influential race leaders will result in the most serious consequences to all, thus retarding the wheels of our progress. So the elder George Washington Woodby is explaining that there has been an error just now. And this error took part on an influential leader among the race, the FBA race. And he said this error will result in most serious consequences to all thus retarding the wheels of our progress. So whatever progress we've been making is going to affect it negatively. This is what Elder Woodby is explaining. Now, here's this reference. He's saying, in the Guardian Weekly, a weekly journal in Boston, Massachusetts, with a wide circulation throughout the United States, Colonel Watterson, a noted white Democrat leader, is quoted as putting his stamp of approval upon the endeavors of Bishop Walters in attempting to deliver the Negro votes this fall to the Democratic Party. So the mistake that has been made according to Elder Woodby by an elder, Bishop Walters. Bishop Walters, according to Woodby, have made this mistake. Now, let's gather a little bit more info on what's happening here. So we have to our right, George Washington Woodby. To our left, we have Bishop Alexander Walters. And they both were in the political struggle for the liberation of the foundational Black Americans, trying to get a foothold on liberty. And according to Elder Woodby, Elder Walters have made a mistake. And this mistake was mentioned by a colonel, a white Democrat, Colonel Watterson. And Watterson argued that Bishop Walters is attempting to deliver the Negro votes this fall to the Democratic Party. It is not necessary to, nor is there any apparent evidence to warrant the impugning of good motives or to attack so-called these good motives of Elder Walters. The fact that Bishop Walters is the most influential minister in the second largest organization of color in the world, and also the further fact that an error, however honestly made by one in such an influential position at so crucial a time, will be direful in its results. Those two facts alone are sufficient reasons for discussing the falsity of Bishop's position with avidity or eagerness and enthusiasm. Well, what happened here? In 1908, Walters denounced the traditional allegiance of African Americans to the Republican Party and became an ardent Democrat. And this is what Woodby is responding to. Bishop Alexander Walters was head of the National Colored Democratic League. He made several speeches describing how the party of Abraham Lincoln had betrayed African Americans. In fact, I also have read that Bishop Walters or Elder Walters was also influential in putting his hand in organizing the NAACP. But Elder Woodby is arguing that he have made a terrible mistake in aligning himself with the Democrats. There is no disguising the fact that the majority of the intelligent Negroes are not enthusiastic over the success of the Republican Party this fall. And they are looking for something better. So here we are in 1908, and we have this issue now where the horns or the intentions of the Democratic Party, their intentions isn't really to help the so-called FBA or Foundational Black Americans, and for that matter, no one. They're using the migrants, whether they're from Asia, whether they're from South America or Africa or the Caribbean islands or Europe, for their own political ends and their own political means. And this pattern is seen all through the Reconstruction. In fact, this pattern has been seen since their inception, since the 1700s. Opportunist. Now, the Republican Party in the 1800s, when it was started, it had different intentions, but however, there was always there the seed of corruption. And this is what we have to dissect and look into in further discussions. But nevertheless, we see the shift, and one of the instrumental players in moving the so-called black people over to the Democratic Party, one of the heavy hitters was Bishop Alexander Walters, along with many of the other black bourgeoisie who will move over to the Democratic Party in exchange for political favors. All in the meanwhile trampling over the masses of the so-called poor people, white and black. So Elder Woodby is explaining that the Negroes were enthusiastic that they was not enthusiastic, over the success of the Republican Party this fall. And they are looking for something better. This is what George Washington Woodby is saying. This is 1908. I tell people in our discussions, I was speaking not too long ago to a group of people, and I explained to them, I said, if someone was to run into this room where we are presently, and they came in and their shirt is all torn and they sweating and distress all on their face, I said, what will be the first thing we will ask? Some people said, well, are you all right? I get it. Yup. That's one of the things we will ask. That's probably, to be honest, the first thing. So what would be the second thing that we will ask? Or what will go along with the first thing? Are you all right? That would be what happened. What happened? And so at that moment in time, you asking the victim what happened. You are asking for a course in history. You are expecting them to give you a review of something that happened in the times past to explain the present situation that they're in at that moment in time standing before you. If we want to understand the condition and the present distress, the present concern of the so-called struggling people and the so-called FBA'S and black people, even Caribbean people, and the strugglers and the toilers of the world, we have to ask what happened. And we have to go into history to understand what's happening now. So we see this shift. One shift, they're leaving the Republican Party. But you have something going on now since the Democratic Party, as I was saying just a few minutes ago, they're showing their horns. They're showing that they really never was a part of or they really never was concerned for the so-called Negro, the FBA, or the foundational Black Americans. They never really was concerned. And so now foundational Black Americans, or so-called Black people, and many others, Latinos and others, are going over to the Republican Party. One of the persons that encouraged them to do this is Donald Trump. But I will argue Donald Trump is not a Republican or a Democrat. Neither is he the one to lead you to the millennium. He never even claimed to be. He have his interests. He's doing things a little different, but the capitalist interests are still the same. He's helping out politically if we understand what the effects of what he's doing as he stir the pot of the capitalist class among the two parties. If we could recognize what he's doing, then, we could get some gains, whether he's doing it intentionally or not, but that's another discussion. But some would say he's not a Republican either. They say he's MAGA. Make America Great Again. That's the acronym. But they still missing the same thing, the political line. You have to look at the political line that's causing you your problems. The Democratic Party never presented their political line or a political line that will actually bring salvation and well-being to all of the citizens. They continue to ride upon the capitalist political line. And when the Republicans was formed, you had the strain of capitalism there too, among the Negroes and the white people and whoever else joined that party and helped form that party. They all wasn't capitalists, but you had that seed there. George Washington Woodbey, he was a Republican at one time, because that was called the Negro Party. So now you have black people, they're fed up with the Democrats, but now they want to run back to the Republicans. Just dependency. So George Washington Woodbey is at another juncture where they're leaving the Republicans and running to the Democrats. And now, 100 years later, they flip-flopping again. And I argue this comes from political backwardness. One of the catalysts for this transition into the Democratic Party is Bishop Alexander Walters. But let's look into this some more. George Washington Woodbey says, again, there is no disguise or disguising the fact that the majority of the intelligent Negroes are not enthusiastic over the success of the Republican Party this fall. And they are looking for something better, although admitting the fact that they are very dissatisfied with the Republican Party. Yet it does not by any means follow that the Democratic Party will prove any more satisfactory. While there is a very strong possibility that the success of the Democratic Party may prove even more unsatisfactory to them. What are the reasons set forth by Bishop Walters for colored voters bolting the Republican and supporting the Democratic Party? They are as follows. The Republican Party has not done all it might have done for the colored people, practically neglecting their welfare. 2, as the Democrats are in the majority in the South, that it is wise to make overtures to them and thus gain their friendship, by which they would both punish the Republicans for their... The second reason is, according to on why Bishop Alexander Walters made this decision, again, as the Democrats are in the majority in the South, that it is wise to make overtures to them and thus gain their friendship, by which they will both punish the Republicans for their dereliction and to make it easier to solve the race problem. So this dereliction of the Republican is arguing the willful neglect of their responsibilities to the so-called Negro or the FBA. They neglected their responsibilities, so therefore the idea is to go over to the Democrats to try to build a friendship with them and also to punish the Republicans for their dereliction or their neglect to help the so-called Negro. Now, George Washington Woodbey continues. He says, now the question to be decided is, if the Negro forsakes the Republican Party and supports the Democratic Party, will that solve or even tend to solve his problem? Before we can answer this question, we must ascertain the cause of the problems. Mr. Ray Stannard Baker, in the September number of the American Magazine, rightfully reduces the causes of the race prejudice to 2 main causes. He says it is race prejudice which is due, on the one hand, to our national dislikes of unlikes, and on the other hand, to the political and industrial competition. The prejudice that is due to our dislikes of unlikes in this age is not the cause of the most serious phase of the question. Contact and education soon removes that. But the political industrial competition, this is those who own the means of production. George Washington Woodbey is starting to center and focus on them as the primary figure in this problem of the so-called Negro or the so-called Black American or the so-called foundational Black American. He says, but the political and industrial competition is the fundamental cause thereof today, and therefore this problem cannot be solved by any political jugglery. The cause being fundamental, the remedy must be the same. No political jugglery. Now, it is what? According to George Washington, would be the industrial competition. What does this mean? He's going to explain further. We have to look at those who own industry, those who own the resources. This is the issue. Okay? Those who own the resources. None of this so-called political jugglery. Okay? Leave that at the door. People still want political jugglery today. Flopping back and forth, still ignoring the issue of those who own the means of production. You look on the news, the capitalists love to talk about Chinese or communist China. China not communist. Never was. The most it could have attempted to be is socialist under Chairman Mao. But to slander communism is the reason why the capitalists like to look at the slander the Chinese, and sometimes they need to be because they have abandoned the teachings, arguably so, with their so-called quasi-capitalist way of doing things. But they keep saying communist China, but you very seldom hear them say capitalist America. And they want to talk about how many people died under socialism. Ain't nobody die under no damn socialism. People kill people, not political systems. But the capitalist political system will cause people to kill people. Those who call themselves socialists, who abandon socialism, they harm people, but they're no longer socialists. It's like a Christian who calls himself a Christian, and then he go out there, next thing you know, he's a robber and a plunderer, and a fornicator, an adulterer. He's no longer a Christian because it's not a part of the Christian principle. If you see a socialist who claims to be a socialist, but all of his practices are none other than the practice of communists or socialists who claim to be socialists and their practices are capitalistic in nature, then they're not communist or socialist. Period. But when we're looking at capitalism, its foundational principle is competition, wealth, and profit before people. Even the Greek philosophers called this manner of economic system strange and wicked. They called it chrematistics. So if this is ignored, and capitalism is never critiqued, and they want to say socialism killed all these people, socialism haven't killed nobody. But if that's the case, if you want to play that game, how many millions died over the capitalist war in World War I? How many hundreds of thousands died in the Civil War, Revolutionary Wars, all of the capitalist wars? How many people dying of starvation and malnutrition and disease because of the capitalist inequality? The numbers mount up into millions upon millions. But when we're looking at this argument with George Washington Woodby, he's explaining, he said, wait a minute. What's causing this problem? You want to go from Republican to Democrat, but that move might be just as disastrous. But the political and industrial competition is the fundamental cause thereof today, and therefore this problem cannot be solved by any political jugglery. The cause being fundamental, the remedy must be the same. The change of political allegiance may conciliate the professional politician. Oh yeah, it may be a move to act friendly towards them, to allegedly reconcile differences. This is what Mr. or Elder Walters was explaining, trying to build friendly relations with the Democrats of the South. No, the conciliate idea, that's not really going to work, according to George Washington Woodbey. And I think from 1908 to 2026 proves that George Washington Woodbey was on point with his assessment. The change of political allegiance may conciliate the professional politician, but it will not by any means eradicate the prejudice due to industrial competition, which is the source of the intense hatred. Why? He's going to explain this industrial competition. His argument is that those who own the means of production and own the breadbasket, which are at this moment in time the capitalists. Now the capitalist industrialists, because the capitalist planter was destroyed by the war almost 60 years prior to the writing of his article here. This industrial competition, according to George Washington Woodbey, is one of life and death struggle between the poor whites and poor blacks for the bread of existence. And as, quote, self-preservation is the first law of nature, unquote, this law has defined every political situation. What then is the conclusion? The life and death struggle for bread, survival. These strings are pulled to this day. So since the migrant come over to America and reap the benefits of the struggle of the FBA ancestors, they trying to get bread. And so therefore they don't care who they hurt or defraud, many of them, not all of them. But this discovery of fraud throughout the United States, which isn't limited to the United States, right? You get the migrants coming over, some coming over legally and working hard. You have others who's coming over and they are opportunists. Why? Because they hungry trying to feed their kids and they don't like the conditions that they lived in the second and third world. However, the FBA must also come to acknowledge that the benefits of this country and of the developed countries of the world, their riches was gained off of the exploitation of second and third world countries. And this becomes clear once you analyze the development of the imperial practices throughout millennia. The colonies are destroyed and robbed and plundered. The mother countries wax fat. And so therefore there is a development of intense hatred of those in the second and third world. Revenge. And until this is reconciled, it's going to be problems. And it must be reconciled. It's going to be. But it won't be reconciled if one's still running on the back of those denominations of the Democrat and Republican and any denomination, aka political party, that are apologists for the capitalist system, which is none other than a matured feudal system, which is none other than systems of exploitation and plunder. FBA, you're going to have to acknowledge that. Each one is going to have to acknowledge one another's pain. You can't begin to separate by race because you got white pain, you got Asian pain, you got black pain. You got pain of all the ethnicities of the world. Why? It's because of the capitalist class, who are the bastard children of the feudalist class. And these classes are none other than the classes which prevailed and dominated by imperialist, expansionist, exploitive practices globally. And that's why we bring the Bible into this. You have the capitalist class, they want to put the Bible in a museum, or they want to turn it over to a book of myths and set it next to Harry Potter. Not so. The Bible exposes the degenerate nature of all mercantilists and exploiters and oppressors of the world, and then tell you what you need to do about it. So this problem that faced the people, what is to be done? George Washington Woodbey, he explains, he says, since the most serious phase of the race problem has its seat in the industrial situation, which situation is due to the ill-born capitalistic competitive system, whereby white men are made to hate even one another or other white men, both also of the same political faith, with the most intense hatred, white man hating white man, some white men of the same political faith, of the same political party hating each other. The whole system in which we, the people, have been deceived into keeping alive is degenerate. It is most foolish and illogical to conclude that a change of political allegiance on the part of the colored man will, under the present industrial system, help his condition materially. And it's the same foolishness today. Hear the words of an ex-slave. A few leading Negroes may get a few political appointments. Is that right? Same thing today. Right? Same thing today. A few leading Negroes may get a few political appointments and a little money, but the masses will remain as before. That's right. So just because they black don't mean a damn thing. They'll rob you, they'll exploit you, they'll use you, and as long as that they hell-bent on keeping the capitalist system alive, they are some of your most dangerous enemies, because they running on this platform that they represent you because you are of the same color. And that's where the problem comes in with identity politics. It is class struggle. They represent the capitalist class, and this capitalist class will not change the living conditions and material conditions of the masses of the toilers and workers of the globe. And people say, well, we just worried about America. You just can't worry about America. Look on your tag or your shirt you got on. Where it come from? Bangladesh, Taiwan? Find out where your bananas and your frozen fruits and your exotic fruits, where they coming from. All this foolishness like you just an isolated, sustained nation. This is a global market. Exploitation to the fullest. The tires you got on your damn truck probably came from Liberia. Your cell phone materials come from the Congo. This is a class struggle. And so it is this illogical foolishness to jump from one class or to jump from one political denomination to another when they both represent commerce, mercantilism, and capitalism. Yes, a few leading Negroes may get a few political appointments, a little money, but the masses will remain as before, according to George Washington Woodbey. The fact is patent to any thoughtful mind that neither the Republican nor the Democratic Party can solve the problem. Neither can education, industrial training, nor the recognition of dignity of service to do so. Now he's taking a shot at Booker T. Washington. And God willing, we're going to cover him too. And Marcus Garvey. They may mean well, or they may have meant well, but the path in which they were paving for us wasn't the path of no race to follow. So this industrial training or the recognition of dignity and service to do it, that's what Booker, that was a part of his dogma. George Washington Woodbey, who was a slave as well, he's saying, no, that's not going to do it. This is evident from the fact that these have not solved even the white man's industrial problem, as seen in the death struggle between the union and non-union laborers and the 5 million unemployed men in the United States today. The only solution for this problem is the destruction of the capitalist competitive system, whereby a large part of the working class of people being unemployed get not much more than mere existence, while at the same time a very small part of the people, rich people, according to Good Woodbey in parentheses, while at the same time a very small part of the people, rich, who produce nothing, get at least 85% of all that is produced. This competitive system must give way to the socialistic or collective system, whereby the government guarantees to every man, white, black, yellow, brown, or red, equal justice and opportunity. This is the same thing that the Declaration of Independence argued. Mankind have certain inalienable rights, and that if the government, which is in control by consent of the governed, ever was to deny any of these, it is the right of the governed to remove those in them, those government seats, and replace them. This is the Declaration of Independence. So we look for a government, not of a competitive system that have races and ethnicities, ignoring the fact that we are all of one human race. But now they have broken off into ethnic factions and struggle for bread. White men killing white men, black men killing black men, white man and black man killing white man and black man. Husbands killing wives, wives killing husbands, cousins and friends murdering each other. It is a great catastrophe that have filled this earth. The competitive system must give way to a socialistic or collective system, whereby the government guarantees to every man, white, black, yellow, brown, or red, equal justice and opportunity, and also the enjoyment of all that he produces instead of only 15% of what he produces, as the Republican and Democrat parties practically stand for. The poor whites and poor blacks hate each other because they are fighting for each other's little morsel of bread instead of working together to produce more bread. Instead of working together to produce more bread. See, this is what we have to consider. We the people. We the people. We have to consider this. Not black power, not white power, but workers' power. And the capitalists stand or sits and watch us destroy each other. For a morsel of bread. And this continues to this day. This using the poor to fight and war with each other. You see, so now you can turn the FBA'S against the immigrants, and the immigrants against the FBA'S, and the immigrants against the Latino, and the Latino against the immigrants and the Asians, and you have a great war. All in the meanwhile, the capitalists are consuming resources, trying to strengthen and solidify their positions. And their positions only stand in place as long as the people are divided. And capitalism, as Ho Chi Minh argued, the mainstay of capitalism is ignorance. So thus, we argue that we must organize another political party, biblically based. Abandon the fallacy that the Bible is religious and it has nothing to do with politics. That's a lie. The book is none other than a political book. And we argue it is a revolutionary catechism. And so we have whites and blacks and Asians and everyone else fighting for bread, scrambling. But all in the meantime, upholding a system that's causing all of the evil. And then this religion of capitalism have two denominations that we keep going back and forth to instead of abolishing them. The pagan denominations of Republicans and the pagan denominations of Democrat. And the Whigs wasn't no better, nor the Federalists. Now we go to a witness to support George Washington Woodbee's argument against switching. If we go and consider what was said by Philip Randolph, and this article is 1923, so this was the same sentiment and more development where Elder Philip Randall could comment on the same subject that Elder George Washington Woodbee was making reference to. So this is the Messenger magazine, February 1923, page 595. It reads, "The election is now history." The election is now history. It was an election by disgust, not by reason. The voters' decision was based upon feeling, not upon thought. It is simply a continuation of the old political seesaw game between the Republicans and Democrats. Whichever wins, the people lose. The people lose. So, what we have here in this article, Economics and Politics, Philip Randolph is explaining it's a seesaw game. And no matter who is elected in office, whether Democrat or Republican, the people still lose. And as the so-called Negro bourgeoisie, they go back and forth and they try to tell you to vote Democrat, as some say, vote blue, no matter who. It's damn foolishness. It is a doctrine of devils, and it is an opportunity for opportunists to continue to plunder you and use this so-called race bait, race card argument where they can plunder you and you would take it, because as long as they're not white. Foolishness. Downright foolishness. And so, as we discussed before, they're arguing over this gerrymandering and all this business. Democrat and Republican struggle for power over drawing district maps. As Philip Randolph said, whether it's Democrat or Republican, it's simply a continuation of the old political seesaw game between the Republicans, old seesaw game between the Republicans and Democrats. Whichever wins, the people lose. Whichever one wins. And so now they're arguing over the gerrymandering, defined in the context of representative electoral systems, right? It's the political manipulation of electoral district boundaries to advantage a party group or socioeconomic class within the constituency. And we're going to fall prey to this foolishness as long as we keep falling to these doctrines of Democrat, Republican. We keep falling prey to the doctrines of race and race divisions. We must analyze the world from the perspective of class struggle. Then we can understand why our migrant brothers and sisters are traveling the world for bread. Then we can begin to understand who is behind this social disruption of humanity. Who's behind this? What class interest is this serving? That's what we got to find out. If humanity is to survive, and it will survive. The Bible speaks of this in great detail, and that's why we deal with the Bible as we approach the Bible from a socio-political perspective. But today, we wanted to hopefully put things in perspective, because that's one thing that's happening with the administration presently. It is truly a laxative that's causing all of the mess to fall out. And it's exposing the mess of the Republican. It's exposing the mess of the Democrat, because all that is wrong in the nation today isn't the fault of the Democrat. They both equally are responsible, because they both follow devoutly the capitalist religion, which is a scourge to the earth. I'm Brother Judah. a representative of the Congregation of Israel, and the NMP, the Nazarene Messianic Party. We'd like to thank you all for tuning into our podcast, What is to be Done? Again, we deal with social or geopolitical, historical, biblical, and social and other scientific content. Most High willing, we'll return again with more discussions and more subjects. Hopefully it can be edifying. And I say peace and blessings to all of you who are sincerely searching. And all of you who have an ear, let them hear.